engaging with other people really creates a kind of collegial environment where people are connected, they're engaged, and they want to achieve.
Leadership is everywhere. In our work, in our family, in our community. We see leaders by their actions. We know their legacy. This podcast is about leaders, people just like you, doing amazing things every day. I hope these stories inspire you, they motivate you, and they fuel your leadership legacy. My name is Vicki Guy. Welcome to Ignite. Hi, and welcome to Ignite. Our environment can shape who we become. Without much conscious thought, our environment can mold our values, dictate our priorities, and shape our family or company culture. So how does all of that impact us as leaders? How can we effectively shape our environments to help others succeed? Today, our guest Gerard Azzari, former executive leader in the pharmaceutical industry and now the author of the book Meatloaf For Breakfast, gives us his thoughts on leadership and his hopes for the American youth. Growing up in the Bronx among diverse families operating as one, Gerard learned important lessons that gave him an edge in leadership, an edge that can help all of us shape our environments. In just a moment, we'll be back to talk to Gerard.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. IT Pro TV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide this is important for me to learn. I would recommend IT Pro TV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
Welcome back to Ignite. We are here today with our guest, Gerard Azzari, who is an accomplished sales leader in the pharmaceutical industry and now an author of a book called Meatloaf For Breakfast. Gerard, welcome to Ignite. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's good to be here, Vicki. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You know, we've known each other for a really long time, too many years to count at this point. And
Yes.
Working with you, I know your leadership style pretty well. And I can say that from my own experience and then working with other people that have worked on your teams, you know, you have one of those leadership styles that certainly does help ignite leaders in others. You know, you're very engaging, you're very inspirational, you do push people to success. So I thought really the appropriate place for us to start today is really just to kind of pick your brain a little bit and talk a little bit about your overarching views of leadership and what has made you a successful, leader in your space.
Well, I appreciate the question, and more importantly, some of your comments of how I've helped people become successful leaders in their own right. And I think to explain that, you have to start off in the beginning and looking at the definition of leadership, which is basically or essentially the action of leading a group of people or an organization. And I could probably stop right there, because if you have a hard time connecting with people or individuals, it's going to be difficult for you to engage and be successful in a leadership role. But there are thousands and thousands of books written on leadership and leadership styles and habits of successful leaders. People like Maxwell, Blanchard, Covey, Goldman, and they all give their perspectives on leadership. And those of us in leadership roles, we take what we think is relevant and pertinent, and we incorporate that, what we see fit, into our own responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
We read their views, and we take what we think is germane. And I also wrote a book, Vicki, but we'll talk much more about that later. But for now, I'll share with you just some basic views. And since joining the workforce as a young adult, I spent about 80% of my professional career in cast and leadership roles. And I've led from the front line to senior executive management. And I've led sales training and development. I led human resources. And I tried to replicate those experiences internationally. And what I've learned is that people in a group, they really don't they're less interested in titles or positions, but they're more interested in engaging with and following someone that is knowledgeable, experienced, and has their best interest in heart. And call that servant leadership, leadership of the people, authentic leadership. You can call it whatever you want. But at the end of the day, all people, they want to be led, they want to be supported, and they want to be guided towards a common mission. Mm. And here's my take more specifically. Leadership is not about power and control. The rewarding aspect of leadership is really helping others grow in their capabilities and then watching them really excel and achieve their goals independently. Because when you do that and they do that consistently, you can then empower them to become part of the fabric of the organization.
Mm. You shared a lot of really insightful information about, starting with the books you read and the theories and then different types of leadership styles that we can, kind of take on. But I think most importantly, it's about, it boils down to that engagement, right? So what is it that has allowed you to be successful in leadership? Where did you learn that part of it? Because that is part of the legacy that you've created for yourself, is that you're a great person to engage with in terms of a leader. And it does make a big difference because people find it to be relatable and, just a very effective style. But where did that come from for you? Did it come from a book or did you learn it somewhere else?
Well, what you just asked me is really the genesis of why I even decided to want to write a book. I look at leadership and my capabilities as a leader, and there's a couple of buckets. One is really a drive to achieve, a drive and a desire to want to lead and learn with other people, and sharing life experiences and leadership. So where did that drive to lead come from? If you look at drive to achieve and what that really means, it's to successfully lead or to achieve a goal, an objective, or a certain level. And you do that by courage, effort, and skills. So again, where does that really come from? Well, it's different for everybody, and it's based on what was seen and heard in the environment early on. My drive to achieve and succeed was honed early on. I was the youngest of 5 children. And when you're the youngest of a tribe, you certainly want to be heard. You want to contribute, and you want to try your best to please those around you. And I've always wanted to be heard. I've always wanted to belong. And I just want to always try to do the best that I possibly can. But more specifically, living in a low income housing project with about 800 other diverse families taught me more about leadership than I could have ever imagined. Living with my parents and siblings, I saw work ethic firsthand, mentorship, discipline, sacrifice, and drive to achieve within my home and surrounding community. And I also learned the essence of emotional intelligence from living with almost 800 other families.
I bet.
And while at school, while playing in competitive sports, and early on in the workplace, I came to know the meaning of social awareness, self-regulation, and engaging with others. And my daily experiences and encounters within that environment taught me these essential qualities. So I was really taught to respect others, even when their views or approach didn't necessarily agree with mine. I was taught to compromise. And that aspect alone certainly helped me advance in my career.
You mentioned being the youngest of 5, and that gave you the ability to kind of look around to see what worked. I'm also the youngest of 5, so I can relate with that. And it definitely does give you that opportunity to look around and say, okay, I like that, I don't like that, I'm going to do that, I'm not going to repeat that.
Exactly.
If you're not the youngest of 5, I guess that a rule could also apply in any situation, just that whole habit of looking around to see what are the things that are working with other people and what's not working, and what do I want to take on as a leader that I can make my own. So I think that's a really great start from a kind of a genesis, as you mentioned, of shaping your leadership styles. Just really looking around and saying, hey, what else is out there? What's
Well,
working?
yeah, you certainly, as the youngest, and it doesn't necessarily only apply to being the youngest,
Mm-hmm.
but being the youngest puts you in a position where you learn by listening and observing, which is an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn what pitfalls to avoid and the direction that you certainly would, how you would go about handling a certain situation or an encounter. And I think that that puts you in a favorable position and gives you a different perspective that others may not have. But as far as leading and learning with others, um, as I've mentioned, I've always preferred to be on the front line. My preference is always to direct, guide, and support a group and really understand what's happening on the front. And I think that also comes from some of the points I've referenced earlier. So when I first started on the front line as a sales professional and then in a management role and then eventually working in the corporate office, I kind of had a dual role. Working in the corporate world, the reality is to simply achieve forecasts and to achieve them consistently. But in that environment and leading at a higher level, you really have a different task. And that task in the corporate world is to work with multiple functions to develop strategies and action plans that then the sales force could utilize and execute.
Mm-hmm.
So by having that dual role, by working in the corporate office and then working with field management, I was really able to see what was required, what resources were needed, what adjustments uh, would need to be made, and more importantly, working in the trenches, you get to know the field, the directors, the field managers, and what their aspirations are, what their and their desire to achieve. How do they come up with that desire to achieve? You really get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
And I also learned that if a company is going to achieve goals consistently, you really need to be very conscious of making the right decisions when selecting leadership talent. Leaders that can effectively uh, deliver results by developing people. Because as you well know, Vicky, capable, competent professionals will achieve results. Leaders who can make all experiences new learning opportunities. And where individuals can embrace the process, have fun, and learn and excel. But the important learning for me was the recognition that not everyone has the social capability to connect with others. For example, when working with my peers leading a large sales organization in preparation for a launch of what would become a blockbuster product in the pharmaceutical industry, we had to expand our sales force. We had to hire directors and managers that would then have to hire their sales personnel. And we made every effort to try and preserve our leadership culture. Um, we wanted to make sure that we had several directors and managers that were able to continue with our legacy of hiring the right people. But it was early, it became evident that some of the directors and managers that we hired, they had some difficulty engaging and connecting with people that they led. They basically wanted to tell their team what to do
Mm.
and how to do it. And they were less interested in engaging. And frankly, they were more interested in power and control. And over time, that became untenable and costly to the company. And changes had to be made. And that's an important learning, certainly for me, as it was for the organization.
Yeah, you mentioned something in there that is really, I think the key to everything that you've just said is that you were on the front line. So I think oftentimes, especially in large organizations, it's easy for somebody in a leadership position to become distant or become just, disconnected from the team or the front line. And it sounds like that ability to stay in the trenches, connect with people that are on the front line, helped you balance out that strategic role that you had with the ability to keep inspiring and motivating people, making sure that you had the right people in the right places, knowing who your talent was, who who had to stay, who had to, I guess, go, for lack of a better word. That's, I think, I don't know if that's 100% common in all businesses. It's easy, I would imagine, to disconnect some.
I think my preference has always been to lead from the front. While I enjoyed the dual role of working in the corporate environment, but I always enjoyed being on the front line. And I think it's obvious that being a leader, you have, at a senior level, you have a lot of responsibility, and expectations are high, and that's obvious. And those that are placed in positions of higher authority have to perform at a higher level. They have to be capable of performing at a higher level, and additionally have to be willing to learn from others on how to enhance their own capability and competence. No one has all the answers, but if we work collaboratively with others, which is why I enjoyed working on the front line and with my partners at the corporate level, we can use the experiences and resources that we have collectively to lead at a high level. And I think in the learning process, for me, was that with those you work with and sharing those life experiences could be a refreshing awakening for a group. And engaging with other people really creates a kind of collegial environment where people are connected, they're engaged, and they want to achieve. And that's where leaders can make a challenging task or objective a meaningful experience and an enjoyable experience as well.
I think the question that's in my head is around, how did you do that without it becoming intimidating? Because, imagine, somebody 2-3 levels above you in terms of hierarchy in an organization coming into the front line and engaging. But I think you answered my question, because you talked a lot about sharing life experiences and creating a culture that just feeds that. So I think that's a really important part also that I don't want to skip over too quickly, because that setting that culture, creating that culture of, look, Gerard's coming in to say hello, but it's not because, of anything bad. He wants to create the culture of sharing those experiences, understanding what drives you, and then providing the support and the environment to help you succeed. So I think that's a really key point that I just wanted to call out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And as I started off, I think when you said someone that's 3 or 4 levels above someone wants to gather information or wants to meet with an individual or a group of managers or directors, to me that was always a non-issue. And the people that I worked with also saw it as a non-issue. And that's why I started off from the definition in the beginning that to successfully lead people, you have to be able to connect with people. That's really the essence of leadership. And if you can't do that, it's questionable whether or not you should be in that role. But the approach to be on the front line has always made sense to me, because leaders deliver results through the habits and work of other people. So it always was reasonable and seemed logical that if I'm dependent upon those on the front line to achieve goals, which allows the company to ultimately achieve its forecast, I really enjoyed and wanted to see what was going on in the front line. And learning through the experience of others really helps build credibility and can assist leaders in communicating a specific strategy or plan to achieve. And one thing that I certainly want to make clear is that from my perspective, it would be pretty boring as a leader to simply bark out orders, not provide feedback, or redirect when goals are not achieved. I call that the bee sting leadership style, where you assess results, you direct, you in some cases may sting, and then you head back into the hive. And I think blindly leading others through intimidation, fear, or threats really demotivates people and can dampen commitment. And I think a lack of support, guidance, and communication is really a sign of potentially a weak or anemic leader.
Or a bit of insecurity, I would imagine, as well.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I think that type of leadership style is usually short-lived and can have negative consequences. So
Yeah.
that's the last thing you
Yeah.
really would want to provide, that type of leadership style.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced situations where we've worked with people like that, and for them it can be a lonely road after a while, for sure.
Well, on the flip side, though, Vicky, you see people that have the highest level in an organization, whether it's a CEO or a chief operating officer or a commercial officer, and you would think that, they may not, all they're worrying about is how can we achieve our forecast. But fortunately, in my experience, I was lucky enough to be able to work with people that they really wanted to hear from people, their subordinates. They were interested. They asked questions. And I guess some of the best experiences that I've had in my leadership roles was having the ability to work with some of those type of peoples. And then you had some that really were focused or concentrated and showing their authority, which may not have been the best experience, but nonetheless, it was a learning experience in itself. So.
Absolutely. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit, if we can, and talk a little bit about the book that you wrote. So it's called Meatloaf for Breakfast. I think you have a copy. Maybe you could show us a copy of it, because a lot of it yep, I like it. I love it. I can see it for sure. And a lot of it is talking about your life experiences growing up in the Bronx and having an environment around you that really pushed you to drive for results and achieve success. But I think a lot of it also, you talk about the youth in America. And I'd love to get just a quick overview of how does what you've experienced in corporations or in your corporate experience translate now into what you're talking about with the youth in America?
I think there's clear parallels in leading at a high level, leading a group of people and engaging individuals, helping them develop in their skills, their knowledge, and ultimately watching them achieve. There's clear parallels to leading children when they're young and give them the guidance and nurturing and support that they need. And I think what prompted me to write a book in the first place was to share, as you said, some of those experiences. And growing up in a Bronx low-income housing project with 800 diverse families really taught me a lot. Regardless of what was going on in our environment, we were all supported by active parents. And really, ultimately, I think parental leadership, parental guidance is really a way to create peace and unity in America today. And to be more specific, I think what really prompted me to write a book in the first place is, first of all, I had time to do it. And second of all, I was grateful for any successes that I have achieved to date. And I think if it weren't for the environment I grew up in, if it weren't for wonderful parents, siblings, friends, mentors, and other shepherds that believed in me, helped push me and helped guide me and show me the way, I most likely would not have been as successful as I was in leading individuals to achieve results. And when you look at society today, I'm not talking anything about political views or anything today. I'm going at the base level. When you look at our society today, things, you would have to agree, have gotten off track. They've become askew. And I think the ultimate leadership responsibility is required, and that's parental leadership in itself. And so just for a second, consider the current state. We clearly have division not only in our homes, kids coming from broken families, but you see division all around us, which manifests itself in different ways. We see violence. We have, unfortunately, mass shootings are almost routine nowadays. You have poverty, racism, dysfunction, chaos, drug addiction, self-gratification.
You're making me depressed, Gerard.
Well, I'm not finished yet. Self-gratification and spiritual void. But knowing that's really constantly seeing that over and over and over again, and knowing from the environment that I came from, I would have to say that it doesn't have to be that way. There can be better unity and peace in our country, or I call it the unification and the desired state. So what's the flip side? Flip side of what just made you depressed? Well, think about cohesion, national pride, peace, financial independence, respect for others, lawfulness, spirituality, and how about this one? Loving others. And that really is what prompted me to write a book. And that's my message, is to have people in every community migrate towards that desired state. So in essence, I strive to awaken the masses and create a new tipping point where people can learn, they could understand, and they could lead the young. Because that's really where it starts, in the home and in their environment, in their communities, and teaching them three simple things, which is really what the premise of the book is. Respect others, take pride in yourself, and maintain a strong desire to achieve. And that's really the fundamentals. And while aspirational, my goal is to have parents, educators, mentors, leaders understand how to create peace in the United States of America. And that's really what my book is intended to accomplish, is to awaken people and broadcast a message pretty loudly on the importance of guiding people, young people, to do their best and respect others willingly. And that's why I wrote the book, Meatloaf for Breakfast, Bronx Logic for Building Strength in America's Youth. So it's really about teaching our youth to embrace the desired state, and which I think will create a more unified and peaceful United States of America. And I also think that's why, with your feedback and with your example, I might even start my own podcast called Unite. So you're an inspiration to me, you always have been, and
Thank you.
I think it's important that the simple message is, let's lead the young. We know that strong parenting is required to get them out of the gate and set on their way. But if you set that foundation in those simple cornerstone areas, particularly respecting others, making sure they take pride in themselves, and maintain a drive to achieve, I will tell you, it doesn't guarantee an individual will be successful moving from childhood to adulthood. But I'll tell you one thing, it'll give them the confidence to really understand how to treat others, and it'll make our world a better place to be.
Well, I've read your book, Meatloaf for Breakfast. And oh, by the way, I won't tell anybody why it's called that, but I love the story about where you got the name. I can certainly see how the learnings and the experiences that you've had throughout your entire life and in the corporate setting as well have really lended some great advice in your book. So where can people find your book if they wanted to buy it?
Well, they could find it on Amazon. They could find it at Barnes & Noble. The first stop on the train would be iUniverse.com, which is the publisher. And most likely or any other bookseller that they want to get it from, it's certainly readily available.
Well, Gerard, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us on Ignite. In just a few minutes, we're going to be back with some final thoughts.
Are you a career changer or a budding tech pro who's looking to start their career in IT? I'm Wes Bryan, and along with my fellow IT Pro TV edutainer Cherokee Boos, we've just shot a new show just for you. Each week, we'll dive into topics to help you launch your career in tech. Watch how to get started in IT on YouTube now. Just head to youtube.com/IT Pro TV to watch, and look for new episodes every Saturday at 9 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time.
Welcome back to Ignite. As Gerard shared, creating and living in an environment that stimulates respect for others, pride in ourselves, and a drive to achieve can be a powerful influence on our success. Thanks for listening to Ignite. Please like us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and subscribe to us on YouTube or Apple Podcasts. From all of us at Ignite, we'll see you next time.